Cool. Sounds good.
All right, and we are live. I also posted my first video with my first guest, Kelly. It's on the free range and on my personal page and stuff like that. So, too late. You didn't get to see it and see what you were getting into, Justus.
Yeah.
Suckered you in. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that I'll be up for it. It's fine.
I guess I'll do a quick intro for everyone. Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of Freeing from the Curve. Today I have Justus, which, by the way, do you realize like how badass of a name that is? Like, is that
Yeah.
literally what you were born with? Like your parents were like, I'm gonna name our kid badass, and it's gonna be Justus.
So it's like a family name, actually. Yeah. So like my great grandpa on like my mom's side was named Nathan Justice Hunting. So like Justice was his middle name,
Uh huh.
and I have his whole name. Nathan Justice Hunting Burkett is technically my name. So like my first name's Nathan, but I've always gone by Justice. Like my parents have called me Justice since the day I was born. But
Right.
it's technically my middle name. So.
Gotcha. I was about to say, like, did your great or like grandfather like also have like one side of his face painted blue, and had a famous speech at one point on horseback that eventually became a movie? I don't know. It sounds like it.
I mean, possibly my ancestors on that side of my family are from Scotland, so it is totally possible.
That's what I'm going with, guys, and that's why there's no other way. But yeah,
Yeah.
with that said, Justice, introduce yourself. Who are you, man?
Yeah, so my name's Justice Burkett. I am somebody who works in the insurance claims industry for a tech company. I also do theater. I have a degree in acting. I live in Tempe, Arizona, and I work out at Free Range CrossFit with this guy, Alex. So that's basically the rundown.
Nice. I did not realize that you had a theater background and degree in it, dude. That's pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's what I've been doing like my whole life basically. Like
Hmm.
I've been acting since I was like 6 years old. So it's
Wow.
basically a hobby at this point. I never make any money doing it or anything, but it's fun and it's
Yeah.
something that I'm still
Yeah. I
active in.
mean, yeah, that's super cool because actually, in a kind of in a weird way, I was also in the arts before I got into, ironically, insurance. I used to be a visual effects artist. So I kind of get, I've worked with actors all the time. I've directed. So like, it's like, oh, so that's actually really neat. With
Yeah.
that said, do you have a favorite play? And I was like, I know it's like, do I throw you in the deep end? It's like, tell me like, what's your favorite movie for a film buff? I'm like,
Yeah. No, actually I do. So like mostly what I've done as an actor and like what I'm most interested in is Shakespeare. I do a lot of Shakespeare and I've read a lot of Shakespeare. And I've actually never been in it or seen it, but my favorite play is King Lear
mm-hmm.
by Shakespeare. And I want to be in that play someday, or at least see it staged because I've never even seen it performed. But I've read it and it's like my favorite play of all time. So
Okay.
um, but all Shakespeare is great. So.
What is it about that specific play that you're like, this is awesome? It's like your favorite.
Yeah, so this is gonna go kind of like a little deep, but it's like I think that play specifically, Shakespeare is like really in touch with the idea of like mortality and like how all of us have like a limited time on this earth, you know.
Hmm.
And it was a play that he wrote towards the end of his life, and he was like reckoning with a lot of things, like like his son had died at a very young age and all this stuff. And so I think that it's just a very beautiful and tragic, like musing on human mortality and the temporary nature of existence and all that stuff. Aside from that, it's like really well plotted. The language is beautiful. So yeah.
Gotcha. Because like I have no idea of this word. Do you like of plays and everything like that? Do you also like what is like the next closest thing to like plays like as a medium that you really enjoy? Is it like musicals? Is it movies? Is it like video games?
So I am not a big musical guy. I studied theater and I've like seen plenty of musicals. It's just not really my thing.
Mhm.
Like I have lots of friends from like my college years from the theater department and all that, and they're like wild about musicals, but it's never really been my area of interest.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably the next closest thing, like the thing that I am interested in, like from like an artistic perspective, is movies, and TV too. I mean, like in the last like 10 or 20 years, TV has like gone like so far in being taken seriously as a medium, and like it's very interesting because like with TV, because you're not restricted to like 2 or 3 hours, you have like long stretches where you're
Mm-hmm.
able to tell like a much more like intricate plot and develop
Mm-hmm.
characters a lot more. So I'd say
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of my favorite stuff is TV shows for that reason, because you get more like development and you get more investment and stuff.
I gotcha. For me, it's like I think it would be pretty similar for like obviously I love movies, but so usually the thing that I found that's like especially in like these crazy times that I found has been like a saving grace has been like me catching up on this YouTube show called Critical Role, which is like a live play of Dungeons and Dragons. And for the audience member, if you do not know, I am a massive Dungeons and Dragons nerd. I play D&D every week, and I that's right. And my deadlift is over 400. So forget you guys. So, no, but yeah, it's very much of that aspect of like the character's development and with the aspect of improv also included. So nothing is scripted. You have no idea what's going to happen, and you just see like this amazing organic change between characters and players just like acting it out. So it's a lot of fun for me to watch.
Yeah, I got a lot of friends from college who are improv comedian types, living in Chicago, and actually four of them have a D&D podcast together,
Nice.
because like you were saying, like there's so many like elements of improv in D&D.
Hmm.
So I think that it like appealed to they're all improv
Hmm.
comedians. So it kind of directly
Hmm.
translates. There's
Yeah.
definitely overlap between
Yeah.
those two.
With that, so with that take going into like the topic of like this crazy times, one thing I did want to talk about during like this whole podcast is like 2020 is not even it's just over halfway. It's a crazy time. And beside, as we're filming this today is June 9th, and there's been a couple of changes on everything that's been going on. How have you been keeping sane in these crazy times? How?
So I'm in a very like privileged position of this not having affected me as much as it's affected a lot of people.
Hmm.
For example, like my job's pretty much unaffected. I just work from home instead of going into the office, which I was already working from home 1 day a week anyway. So it's kind of like just I'm working from home more, but otherwise everything's pretty much the same. And again, in a pretty privileged position to like not have to worry about where I'm going to live or worry about the money coming in or any of that stuff. Also, I'm kind of an introvert normally. Like I don't do a lot of socializing. I don't like go out to bars a lot. I don't
Hmm.
go like hang out with people very often.
Hmm.
So most of the time I'm at home anyway. Even
Hmm.
before all of this was happening, I'd pretty much like to stay in and watch movies and stuff. So I've been just pretty much business as usual as far as that's concerned. The biggest thing, and I assume we're going to talk about it more, is fitness, right?
Hmm.
Because I consider fitness like my like therapy, right?
Hmm.
It's like the thing that keeps me in like a mentally good space. And if I don't do it, not only am I not going to hit the like physical goals that I want to hit, but also I'm going to struggle mentally.
Hmm.
And so because of that, we really prioritized getting fitness equipment as soon as the gyms were closing,
Hmm.
and highly prioritized being able to continue working out.
Hmm.
So again, thankfully, I'm in a pretty privileged position where I was able to do that, right? And I got a barbell and some weights and a bench and stuff, and have been able to do that,
Hmm.
which I know a lot of people haven't. So I feel pretty lucky. Swooped in there before it all sold out. So
Yeah. And by the way, Justus, we can talk about anything you want. It doesn't have to be strictly about fitness. It's mostly, of like, like how we are doing in general through these crazy times, right? Like, and I agree. For me, like fitness has been a big thing. Even though when our gym has been closed for a couple of months, I was also very privileged and blessed that my roommate loves having a home rig, and so I was like, oh my god, I'm so lucky, and I got to work out at and so I basically at home and be more um, introverted than I usually am, kind of thing. So just
Mhm.
like woo. But yeah, no, it's I think in this is kind of like the lesson. Like I've been doing CrossFit for close to my 3 year anniversary, which will be July 5. And for those who may know me, I used to be quite hefty boy. I'm less FT, but I definitely will say that like it has changed my perspective a lot. Going through like the going like having a routine of physical, and like it has helped me, especially with our community. And I think that word is more prevalent than normal, especially regarding outside of like our typical community. But like the CrossFit world, how things have changed about that. Um, but also like it has like a change a lot of like my mindset for a better and healthier way. And so definitely I definitely get it when you say like the physical training, physical goals, but also like it helps me keep sane and not be like cooped up more than usual, is a very very big thing about it for sure. So, Justice, during this whole like quarantine and just 2020 time in general, what have you learned about yourself that you might not have learned about throughout, like, the typical, like, before everything happened, how the days can sometimes breeze by?
Yeah. Um, so a thing that I learned pretty early is that I'm uh, a lot better at like managing myself and being like autonomous than I initially thought, right? Because it's like I was working from home right away, um, and pretty much since like early March, right? And I'm not like management level at my
Mm-hmm.
company, so like nobody reports to me, right? But it, I guess I didn't really ever know because I never really had um, the opportunity to like be like autonomous because I used to work remotely, but I still had to go into an office for that job. Like when I lived in Utah, I worked remotely for a company out of Arizona. So it's like I had like my coworkers were all remote,
Mm-hmm.
but I still had an office that I went into and like a
Mm-hmm.
desk that I sat at, right? And people who would notice if I wasn't there or wasn't doing my work or whatever. And so just this has been a very interesting learning experience for me because like the first few weeks I was like working my ass off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I didn't necessarily expect that. And like part of me thinks that those first few weeks, especially those first like maybe 3 weeks, I was working harder at home than I would have at the office
Mm-hmm.
because there was like a lot going on then too. And that was very interesting for me because I was like, oh, even with like no oversight, like, yeah, I have to check in with my manager, but it's like they're not standing over my shoulder and they're not walking by my desk. They're not going to know what I'm doing when, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still like very like on task, like still very driven, and still like able to accomplish like a lot of the stuff that I had to do and like really prioritize and like set goals and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
that's never something that I thought that was like second nature to me. Like I always
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh yeah, I need to be managed. Like I need incentives and stuff. And a thing that I kind of learned about myself was like, oh, like actually, if I care about the work and if I care about, you know, serving my team and helping like my company and helping myself too, you know, then I'll just get it done,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of cool. So, and that kind of translated to the stuff in other realms, like in the gym too. It's like even though I didn't have a class time or a coach who was expecting to see me or other people who were going to give me crap if I wasn't there, right, or wasn't showing up or wasn't like applying myself, I still went
Mm-hmm.
and worked out and like I was still like pushing to improve, and like again setting goals
Mm-hmm.
and working to achieve them and stuff. So I kind of surprised myself in that way because I didn't necessarily know that like that was in me. I thought I
Yeah.
was going to have to work harder at it than
Yeah.
I ended up having to, you know.
Gotcha. Is there um is there any beside like obviously like it seems like this whole experience of learning about yourself and like setting positive goals that it should like it highlighted a very positive story about yourself you're surprised about. Is there anything like negative that has like shown up you're like, oh, I gotta watch out, don't let yourself fall into that bad habit or anything like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, definitely. So like, I feel like I have been drinking more and sleeping less
Okay.
in quarantine than I was before everything closed down and before I was at home so much.
Hmm.
And as far as like sleeping less, I don't even necessarily know if it's that I'm going to bed later. I mean,
Hmm.
some of it is, right? But then also like just like waking up in the middle of the night, like just quality of like restfulness has gone down. And I think maybe that's because my stress levels are up or something.
Hmm.
Um, but then yeah, also I've just been like, there's nothing to do.
Right.
So when work's over, we're like looking for basically some way to like signify like, oh, this is the end of the workday and now we're
Hmm.
in leisure time.
Hmm.
And that used to be driving home, right?
Right.
From the office and showing up at home. And that was the separation between work and play, essentially.
Hmm.
But now that the office is home, right?
Hmm.
I feel like I've been uh, using alcohol as a distinction instead of
Okay.
the commute
Okay.
home, right?
It's instead of your drive home, it's booze. Okay.
Yeah. Instead of being like, oh, I'm not at work anymore because I'm not at the office, it's like,
Right.
well, now I'm not at work anymore because I got a drink in my hand, right?
Okay.
And and I don't want to make it sound like I have like a problem or anything because
Right.
it's definitely
Right.
not to that level, but it's from like a general like health and wellness
Right.
standpoint. It's like drinking like 2 or 3 days a week instead of one day a week is
Hmm.
probably not ideal.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of like a vice that I've had to be like, okay, let's like pump the brakes a little bit. We don't want to
Mhm.
like, nurse a bad habit. So
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm guilty of like I love eating. It's
mhm.
very I love food. It's simple. I will never get a beautiful physique because pizza is just amazing. And that's just what I gotta say about it. And chocolate chip cookies are my kryptonite. No, but I definitely understand like, like especially like that distinction between when you're at home working from home and in a place of privilege as you mentioned that we're able to not be affected by the whole situation super much in the way of like we're able to be working even and like that separation like I kind of before I got into the insurance business. I also used to be kind of like freelance. I used to work at home and I found out like super early on was that the best way to or something that helped a lot was have a designated work area. And so like I turn like my guest room to like my work area and then I will just not do anything fun in there. Just like this is my work, I'll separate it and it has kind of helped me a lot in that way. But I definitely understand what you mean with like the driving from home. It kind of gives time for your brain to like this is decompression mode and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Now
Yeah,
question
exactly.
Now, question about you said stress. Now, you said you're feeling more stressed than usual. Is it because of like your body's having a different time between separating between home and work, or is there any other factors that you are willing to talk about? Obviously, I don't want to press too hard about it.
Yeah. Well, like, I can talk about it in kind of like broad terms, right? So,
Hmm.
like, it's just been like a weird time because it's like, a everything in the news has been like crazy, like as you know, for the last like 3 or 4 months, right? And so it's like I feel like that's an element of it where it's just like everything you're hearing all day about what's going on in the world is just like negative, 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 right? So that probably doesn't help, but that's the state of things, right?
Hmm.
But then beyond that, it's like um, my place of work, like many people's place of work, has been affected by this from like economically
Hmm.
everybody's been affected, right? So a lot of companies have let people go. A lot of companies have done some restructuring, refocusing to address the needs of kind of this new economy post pandemic, right?
Hmm.
Or like during the pandemic, right? And without going in too much into like where I work or like what my job is or whatever, just like knowing that maybe like some of my coworkers have been affected, people I
Hmm.
know have been affected. I think that that also takes a psychological toll. Like I haven't been devoting like a bunch of conscious thought to it, but I feel like it's
Right.
affecting me like kind of on
In
a
the back of your
subconscious
head,
level.
for sure.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
I've definitely had workers and they had every right to do so. And I was like thinking about and I thought of it like too like early on like and I had like a one-on-one talk with like my manager of like am I going to still have a job? That was like literally as like maybe like like I don't know but like it was like I think it was like I'm fortunate that my manager is very open and stuff like that and will give us like proper heads up. But it was like hey, am I still going to have a job because of this craziness? And this at this time, yes, and that if anything were to happen, it wouldn't be for a something significant to happen. So I was very blessed in that position. But obviously, I had friends who were in the same position that I am. That were like freaking out because I was like they've hurt so many of their friends. And in context, I'm a single guy. I don't have like I don't have a fiance. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have puppies, dogs, cats. I'm kind of like in a weird way. I don't have any quote unquote ties, or I don't have a mortgage or anything like that. I don't have anything like significant that like relies on me. And so for my friends who are in this position, I will be to be honest scared, terrified, because like I can't understand what their shoes are, but the amount of like that affects other people when you are in that source of income would definitely put a lot of stress on me. And so,
Yeah,
for being empathetic to your coworkers and even do that, that's great. To like, it's like shit, like these are people I might that was the last day I saw them, because they might not have a job and then they're gone or whatnot. And yeah, it's kind of like this. It's very stressful, and about the news too, like every day. I've had a hard time like trying to disconnect from it and look into the positive out of everything. In my first podcast with my friend Kelly, she said that even she has kind of like uninstalled Facebook from her phone, just because it's just too much. It's too much, not including the COVID-19 situation, but like the George Floyd situation, and then stuff like that too. So like it literally feels like borderline Mad Max. We're gonna be having like we already have masks. We're in the desert. I'm waiting for like janky cars and like flamethrowers with guitars. That's basically what I'm waiting for. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's pretty insane, but
yeah.
yeah, it's hard, and I think you're not the only one when I say there's a lot of back burner stress in the back of our heads that's affecting us. That's like in ways that like is making us insane. This is also a reason why to be selfish about it. Like I started this podcast is because then I could interact with people, because social distancing, and especially in the resurgence that we might have with all the rioting, is gonna probably gonna happen, in my opinion, kind of stuff. So this is me to the audience. I'm being very selfish. I'm being very blunt about it, kind of way. But yeah, so with that said, looking into like the different things of the future, what is something that you have missed during, or if there's anything that you missed during like the quarantine, and then what is something that you're very much looking forward to when things like kind of like goes back to operational level?
Yeah, so I've missed multiple times over the course of this. I've been like, man, I just want to go to Alamo Draft House. Have you been to
I'm
Alamo?
so sad.
Yeah,
Did you hear?
they filed for
Yeah.
bankruptcy. Yeah, which
So
doesn't
mad.
necessarily mean that they're gonna cease operations, like not
Uh-huh.
necessarily, but it might mean that, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, will I ever get to go to Alamo again? So that's been bumming me out. For like anyone who might be listening or watching this who doesn't know,
Shoot
Alamo
fam.
Draft House is a movie theater where they serve food and alcohol, and it's basically like table service. Like they bring it to you while you're watching a movie. And there's like a little table and you can put up like order cards and stuff. And it is like the best experience. I love watching movies at Alamo. And haven't been able to, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and they filed for bankruptcy as a result of all of this. So the Arizona chain did, not the
Yeah.
not the chain as a whole. So the ones in Texas and the ones in New York and all that are apparently fine, but ours may not reopen, which sucks because I live like 2 or 3 blocks away from the Tempe one,
Hmm.
and we go there like not all the time, but like pretty often, right?
Hmm.
When we were going to see a movie, that's where we'd go. So
Yeah.
that's a thing I've missed out on, and a
Hmm.
thing where I'm like, I might not even be able to do that once everything's reopened, right?
Yeah.
As for something that I'm looking forward to doing, I just want to go to like um, go somewhere and like stay in an Airbnb or a hotel and like just go somewhere and like have a vacation, right? Because it's like even though people can like technically do that right now, with like some Airbnbs are still open, and like I have coworkers who have gone on vacation during this, it's like it's not the same. Everything's closed, you know. And so I'm excited for the world to be back to normal and for me to be able to like take a road trip, go somewhere, see something new.
Mhm.
And because I've gone like hiking and stuff on like trails that I know like aren't going to be very popular, so I'm not going to be, you know, violating social distancing or whatever. And it's been okay, but it's like it's not the same as like going somewhere and staying overnight.
Mhm.
You
For
know, going
sure.
to a restaurant that you don't know and all that.
Yeah, for sure. I was like going back to the draft test, I got like one of the special deals where I got like 20 plus movie tickets throughout that I can use throughout the whole year for like basically $40. And I was like so excited. And I'm like, no, no, all my tickets I don't get to use. If we do get to go to the house, please let me know because I'll give you those tickets. So then we can just like you get free movie tickets to the movies. But I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I was so sad. And they have amazing milkshakes. I'm so sad about that too. Oh
yeah.
man.
Oh man. And the bar out like outside.
Yeah, right in front of it.
Yeah,
God, they
so
got
good. I changed my answer. The thing that I'm looking forward to after this is all over is actually, now that I think about it, is going to a live show or like a live show for like a podcast or a comedy show
mhm.
or something, or like a
Oh
music like a concert, right?
nice.
Because
Yeah, yeah.
we had like 3 live shows that we were going to go to
Mhm.
scheduled, and they all got canceled. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to being able to like go to a venue and like
Mhm.
see something live. You know?
Yeah, I think the I love stand up, and I think one thing that's like opening back up is probably the 10, I think it's a 10 p.m. improv is kind of like reopening with like selected. It's weird. It's not the same, obviously. It's kind of like it's more of an intimate venue, and but unfortunately, it seems like they're like separating seats and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's weird. I'm also kind of like as a fan of comedy, I'm kind of curious of like what kind of like material like as a new stand-up comedians are gonna have during this time of like what kind of jokes they're gonna release, what kind of like we're also in a weird comedy age that I feel where like a lot of the comedians are doing like reflection of things, like a perfect example of that would be like Dave Chappelle, like one of our the comedy icons, and he's been so insightful of like of like how to make jokes, but also like how he reflects the times. And now we see a bunch of shows like Asir, not Asir, Hassan, from
Mhm.
like on Netflix, like things like that, like have like do a lot of reflection. So I am kind of curious on like the material is going to be like when we see it, whenever we see it live. But yeah, man, like oh god, there was this really funny quote, and I think I said in the last podcast, but like being as an introvert and being like constricted, it feels like this is from like the Phil DeFranco podcast. He says like even introverts would fuck with a park right now, which I was like, that's very very accurate. It's like yeah, I there was definitely a time I was like, yeah, but I could go outside even if it's 115 and be okay with it, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Completely agreed. That's why I've been hiking, right? It's just get outside, just like change the scenery, breathe
yeah,
some
for
fresh
sure.
air.
For sure, it's like, oh man, that'd be fun. Yeah, I'm just excited to see like how things are happening. I've been dying to actually dine out. So like I used to do, I love trying out new restaurants and the food, and just been like, not right now. I'm like, I get it. It's just like miss it kind of thing. And I'm like, I will say, I think like. I don't know about you, but I feel like this whole thing has made me slightly more germaphobe comparison to everything. It's like I'm like kind of thing.
Yeah, it
Um,
definitely makes you like really aware of how many
mhm,
things you touch when you're out in public. Because
yeah.
it's like I was not a germophobic person at all before
Mhm,
this. I'm still not like really like worried about that.
yeah.
Obviously like I'm worried about like COVID, but like
Right.
just on a more general level, like I've never been like a germophobic person. Like I don't really think about, the
Mhm,
possibility of me getting sick a lot, right?
mhm,
But like this has definitely made me hyper aware of like
yeah.
touching like shared surfaces out in
Mhm,
public, because it's like if I'm at the store, if I'm like at the grocery store and I like pick up a piece of fruit that I think I'm gonna buy, and then I look at it and it doesn't
mm,
look good and I put it back,
mhm,
it like in the back of my mind I'm like, oh man, like I just touched that and like put it back,
yeah.
and everybody saw me do that, right?
Right.
And they don't know if I like have it or if I'm carrying it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, that like makes me very aware of like being very careful about what I touch out in
Mhm,
public, and like how I like behave and how I interact with stuff. Because I like on the one hand, I don't want people judging me, being like, "Oh, this guy's not taking like this pandemic seriously,"
Hmm.
and on the other hand, too, like I want to protect myself, right? So I don't
Right.
want to touch a bunch of stuff and then
Touch your
touch
face.
the touch the inside of my car, touch my face, touch my dog,
Hmm.
and all that, right? So so it definitely does make you like way more
Hyper
aware of it.
aware. Yeah, for sure. I was like, I'm now like, it is in that example of like for food, I'll be like, I do this, I'll tuck my hands in. Not like, the move when you try to show off your muscles. It's not that, just like, I'll be like, I'll peek over, I'm like, okay, this kind of looks good. And then I'm like, this is what I want. And I'll quickly like snatch it. I'm like, okay, this is what I want. I'll just put it in the basket and just move on. Cause like, if I look at it for too long, I'm like, it's not the greatest. But I'm like, no, I've made a decision. I'm gonna live with it, and so this is what I get.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's like I guess I'm getting this now.
yeah, it's like, what is throughout this whole thing, what is something that you've taken for granted, and then realizes like, oh, I've been taking this for granted because since everything has happened.
So it's kind of a dumb answer, but in the year 2020, I never thought that like ordering things on the internet was like not going to be an option. But because of how like the pandemic has like interrupted the supply chain, it's like there's some stuff like for example gym equipment, right? It's like we bought our initial stuff like our barbells and our plates and stuff,
Hmm.
and then everything sold out everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like Rogue was sold out of everything, like all the companies had like no equipment left.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, in like 2 or 3 weeks they'll catch up and it'll all be back, right? And it has been months, and we
Hmm.
literally just looked for a pair of 45-pound plates today, right?
Hmm.
We wanted to get two more 45s for the gym, and no one has them still, right?
Hmm.
And that's definitely something I took for granted before all of this. I was like, oh yeah, you just like if you ever need anything, just buy it off the internet. It'll be there in a week or
Hmm.
less, right?
Right.
Like with Amazon Prime, it's there like sometimes the same day, right?
Right.
And you get into like such like a 21st century mindset where you're like everything's at my fingertips. I want it all now.
Hmm.
Like give it to me like right away,
Right.
right? This has kind of like forced me to think a little bit more like to think ahead a little bit more, to think
Hmm.
like be a little bit more future thinking,
Hmm.
and being like, okay, I am not going to be able to have this thing immediately. Like I don't get this thing right now when I want it, so I have to plan how I'm going to exist until then, right?
Right.
How I'm going to
Right.
be a little bit more strategic with like how I'm going to go without the thing that I previously could have gotten like right in the blink of an eye, and
Right.
be like, okay, I'm not going to have it for 3 days, 7 days, 2 weeks, whatever.
Hmm.
And what am I going to do until then? You know?
Yeah. Like the example of like I think the most famous example of that is like freaking toilet paper was
Yeah.
like as like when people were just late to the game and it's like it was like the black market trying to find like a roll of toilet paper like what can I use? Can I get a bidet toilet instead? Just like trying to find alternative to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like it's insane. Like for the first time in over 2 months, earlier this week I'm like, oh, is this? It was like you're so used to like the empty shelf for like the towels and paper towel and toilet paper, and you're like, I'm like looking at this. I don't see a riot. I don't have to be like a running back. I'm like, I bought this. I'm like, wow, and I was like, oh, it's kind of like a nice surprise. Like I can actually get this, but yeah, actually, like kind of like this brought up like an idea, like a question for me, like with how the basically businesses have kind of like all changed throughout this. Going into the topic of fitness, not like excluding CrossFit in general. How do you think that is going to affect like gym businesses and then people working out from home? Do you think there's going to be more, in your opinion, do you think there's going to be more people working from home, like working out from home because they have all of this, or do you think that everyone's going to be excited to go back to like their EOS Fitness, their Lifetime Fitness, or whatever fitness they're going to? And with so, do you think like this is gonna be freaking massive sale on plates now?
So I think that it's probably like the reality is probably going to be somewhere in between, right? Because it's like, and I also think this would like with offices too, with because all these people have been working from home, and it's like after this is all over, I don't necessarily think 100% of these people are going to go right back to their offices, right? I think some people are going to stay working from home, maybe permanently, maybe semi-permanently, right? And I think the same thing's probably true of gyms. It's like there's probably people who like bought a home gym because of this, right? Like I'm one of those people. And they're either going to split their time between their home gym and their existing gym. And just like for a little bit of context, like I used to have no home gym. Right before this, I had no home gym, but I had two gym memberships. I had one for the CrossFit gym and then one for a regular big box gym, where I could go to do like heavy bench press or like whatever. And I'd work out there on like Sundays when the CrossFit gym wasn't open. So already I have kind of landed in the middle ground between the two, between like a home gym and going to like still being a member of a gym, because I have the CrossFit membership, but I canceled that other gym membership because now that I have the home gym with a rack and a barbell and plates, I didn't need that other membership, right? So like already like that is a change that I've made, and I feel like a lot of people are probably in a similar boat, right? Where they're like, oh, maybe my gym's opening back up, but I don't have to go there anymore because I have the equipment at home. And maybe they figure out that they like working out at home better. Maybe they just still don't feel comfortable with it because even though the gym's reopening, they're still like worried about exposing themselves to the virus or whatever, right? And so I feel like the reality is probably going to be like somewhere in the middle. I don't think gyms are going to go away, like I definitely think that there will always be a place for people who want to participate in gym culture, and people who want to like do group fitness, like CrossFit gyms. I don't think that those are going to go away because I think that there are definitely people who go there for the culture and the community. At the same time, I definitely don't think gyms are going to get 100% of their people back. And there's definitely a lot of gyms that have already closed and probably more that still are going to. I think I read somewhere like 38,000 gyms countrywide have closed already. And I think that number is probably going to go up because I think that even when states reopen, a lot of people just won't go back. And you also have to think about like the gym casuals too, like the people who are just getting into fitness. And it's like, if you just got into fitness right before this happened, after this is all over and your gym opens back up, what percentage of those people who just started fitness before all of this went down, what percentage of those people go back? And I imagine that percentage is probably very low because that's a very demoralizing thing to happen to you as a beginner, right? So I think that there's probably going to also be like a large percentage of those people who just don't return at all, or find something else, right? Because maybe when they're in quarantine, they discover that they really enjoy doing yoga or running or something that they don't necessarily need like a membership to a conventional gym for. So yeah, I think that what we're going to see instead of like the death of commercial gyms is just kind of like a diversification of like what it means to work out and like be a member of a gym. There's probably going to be a lot of specialty gyms that survive this fine, boxing gyms, CrossFit gyms, powerlifting. But I think that the big box commercial gyms are probably the ones that are going to suffer the most. That's just my opinion.
I agree upon that. Like, I don't think maybe they're gonna go, it's the end of the big commercial gyms, but I think like they're gonna be. They took a massive blow during this. I also think because of hitting the point of you being an example of, like you said, like I'm very much more hyper aware of like germs and everything like that. That I think maybe like smaller gyms, that have like a fitted like a certain amount of people that can come in at once. I think that is probably going to be something of a trend or something that we're going to see a lot more common throughout it, for at least for the foreseeable future, depending on how everything is happening. So I think that's probably going to be something that, that's just how it's going to happen for a while. Because like in the mentality of like, and this is my mentality, and, I could be completely wrong of how it is and whatnot, but I'm like, I'd rather not go to a big place where many people come in and out of the door and touch things, and there's not enough staff to keep things clean. Like you can never control that much of like hygiene until like the end of the day or before the gym open, everything has been deemed clean and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be more of like in a weird disguise. It's going to be like the smaller independent businesses, whether it is CrossFit type gyms or independent training or F45. I don't even know what half of these stand for, or the differences between them nowadays are going to be like. I think it's probably going to be something like that. That's going to be standing more throughout the time. So, but that's, like I said, that's just my opinion. So, with that said, what is something like, what is your opinion of like, and also I think that also applies to offices. Like when you mentioned of like that, at least for where we're coming from, I don't, from the company that I work at, there's going to be more like waves of things of how it's going to happen. I think it's something that, like it's pretty common for a lot of businesses where they're not like, all right, everyone, let's go back in. It's going to be more of like incremental wave of like people coming back in to see it is this potential of like hybrid where you're working maybe like half from home, half in the office, limited amount of people are going to come in kind of thing, or very much possible like people are going to be decide to become more permanent home kind of thing. um with that said, I don't think the people that are going to be wanting to stay home are going to be parents. They're like, I can't handle my kids anymore. Like, I need to, this is my break. I'm going to go. I'm just kind of get the, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm talking on my butt, but I think it's like, like it's a joke, but I think it's just like, it's talking to Kelly, who's, a teacher, and, how the kids had to work, like study at home. Parents like, the appreciation for teachers is definitely there now, and they're like, I can't do this, how do you manage this kind of thing. And I think that's
Mhm.
probably like, I'm ready to go back to the office kind of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've heard from my coworkers who have kids. They're the ones who can't wait to go back, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I could do this forever, but all
Yeah,
right.
I kind of like it too. I definitely didn't realize like how introverted slash extroverted. I think for me, like I need that communication with someone to like the working out. That's like my social hour to like decompress. And then like, but I don't mind working from home at all. It's been very convenient, save a lot on gas. I'll say that much. So
Yeah.
like, and then also how gas was so cheap. Holy guacamole, that's insane too. But yeah, with that said, is there anything that you want to talk about, Justice, about this crazy, or anything that you want to vent and stuff? This is an open space, even though it's being recorded. Just FYI, that.
Yeah. I don't know. Like when I was thinking about like um just kind of reflecting on like this time and being like, hey, like what has been like my takeaways from this? Like a lot of them are like very much just like material things, not so much like mindset changes and stuff like that. But like I've been thinking about like the way that I've been training, the way that I've been eating, the way that I've been working, right? And I feel like this has actually like, and I don't want to minimize like how bad this has been, because obviously like globally like this event has been terrible, and like a lot of people have like suffered and lost people, and that's terrible, but like reflecting on it like on a personal level, it's been very interesting to me because this terrible situation has forced me into some habits that I think I maybe wouldn't have like arrived at otherwise, and made me realize some things. Um, Again, like I was saying, with my training, my diet, my work, right? And I kind of already talked about the work thing where I'm like able to like self manage. But and like as for like my diet, like I have so much more control when I'm at home all day
Mhm.
than when I'm at the office. Because again, not getting too much into the company because I don't like to talk about where I work, because they're in the news a lot. But where I work, it's a tech company, and there's lots of free food. There's
Mhm.
always stuff around, right? And I know that even some people who don't work in tech, like there's always stuff. There's always donuts, cookies. Someone always brings something in, right? And then on top of that, like the company provides a lot of stuff at my work. So there's always snacks, drinks, lunch, whatever, right? And it's actually kind of funny. I was doing a bulk from September to like the end of September to like mid March, right?
Mhm.
And right as I was finishing up my bulk and getting ready to cut is when the shutdown happened, right? And being at work during my bulk was great because there was all this food around, and I was like,
Mhm.
a calorie is a calorie. I'm just going to eat everything I see. Basically,
Mhm.
was my strategy. And I went from like 168 to like 192. So I gained
Mm-hmm.
like over 20 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
like 24 pounds or whatever. And but just by like basically the seafood diet, seafood and you eat it, right? um, so yeah, and then the shutdown happened, and I was like, okay, this is actually, again, like, not to minimize it, but like from a personal perspective, I was like, this maybe is a blessing in disguise, because I have been forcibly removed from all of that temptation,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like only what I have in the house. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, if it's something that doesn't benefit my goal now of cutting down a little bit, um, then I'm just not going to buy it, because if it's
Mm-hmm.
not in the house, I can't have it. And restaurants are closed, so I like literally can't go out and get it a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always food delivery, and alcohol, which I mentioned earlier, right? I can always drink
Mm-hmm.
my calories, but by cutting down on that temptation of like, oh, someone brought donuts in the office, and I'm just going to snag one of those, and then one turns into two, and two turns into
Right.
2.5, right? So it's been much more beneficial, I think. Um, and it's made that easier for me, and I think that maybe I'll be able to translate those habits back
Mm-hmm.
into the office once that temptation is there, because I'll have already like been used to being like, okay, for the snack I'm eating yogurt and almonds, not
Mm-hmm.
a bag of chips or whatever.
Right.
And then for training too, it's like, with the gym being closed, I like, by default, I kind of like refocused onto what I was wanting to achieve the most,
Mm-hmm.
because the CrossFit gym was still posting like workouts and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and doing workouts in the park, like group workouts. And I didn't make a conscious decision to be like, no, I'm not going to participate in that. I'm going to do my own thing. It just kind of
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Right.
And I ultimately ended up kind of focusing
Mm-hmm.
uh, on maxing and on power
Mm-hmm.
lifts for
Mm-hmm.
like 3 months, basically, or for 2 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without making like a conscious decision to. I was just like, I'm going to go out and do what feels right. I'm going to go out and do what it feels like my body needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, for most of those 2 months, that was bench,
Mm-hmm.
deadlift, or squat, right? And I had a friend who came over to the home gym, and would lift with me, and his goals were very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we would have like bench day, deadlift day, squat day every
Mm-hmm.
week, and then I would do like some accessories and some supplementary stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
occasionally throw like a WOD from the free range programming in there.
Mm-hmm.
And like, again, without really making a conscious decision or like putting very much thought into it, I put 50 pounds on my deadlift. I put 5 pounds on my bench, and I put 15 pounds on my squat to get it back up to where it was like 2 years ago.
Nice.
And that's like the first measurable progress that I've had in all of those lifts,
Mm-hmm.
in like a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, like, it was kind of a breakthrough moment for me, where I was like, oh, like, being able to focus on like one thing for a little bit, like,
Mm-hmm.
I can really see the change.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm like done with CrossFit and gonna like do powerlifting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it was very nice for me to be like, oh, if I want to focus something, I can just focus it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can take that mentality back to CrossFit and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if the WOD is like a bunch of cardio moves,
Mm-hmm.
and my goal right now is not to shred down, my goal
Mm-hmm.
is to bulk up or to maintain. I can take that pace a little slower. I can ratchet the weight up, and I can continue to make incremental change in the direction that I want
Mm-hmm.
by modifying it myself. I don't need to go 100% all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I can think a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more strategically about my training.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, I think that's kind of what I took away from it in that respect. So that's been the big takeaway for me. But again, like I said, I'm in a position of privilege where I can think about these things, and I don't have to
Right.
think about, oh, what am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for
Right.
stuff? Um,
And I think especially in this time, like, like it is in talking like on the bigger scale thing of like, the core the privilege, which I'll hit. What I want to actually let me go touch back, with the physicality and the focus of training, it is nice to see, like, oh, we can, if we focus on this, we'll be able to see like actual numerical goals to like change and like see those goals. But also specifically when you said, like, hey, I can control my pace and everything like that. My mentality when I first went in, when I started CrossFit about a little over 2 years, like 2 years ago and how much I lost weight and how much my goal was is very different of like how I interact with the workouts now. Very much of like, like I realize like if I go ham sandwich in the morning when I do this workout, I'm gonna feel completely drained and exhausted, and I'm gonna do terrible at my job at like my actual job. So I have definitely like changed of like how I tackle the workouts for what feels right to avoid injury at all costs, to do these kind of things, but also to what are my health and fitness goals, right? Like I will modify for a thing like for right now, like I try like personally in this time I'm like, okay, I'm gonna reduce the weight so then I can do more reps, so I can do more cardio volume, so I can start cutting down some weight because I've been eating like crap because quarantine has not been nice to me with my stress eating habits, which is something I definitely realize in more highlight. I'm like, man, I got work to do. But like that's kind of like the fun too of the journey is like if you kind of you're already quote unquote peak to where you want to be, then you'll be bored with yourself. Like, what are you gonna do next, right? Like, and that's kind of like why CrossFit has been like my like as much I love CrossFit obviously, and I don't want to be like the poster boy like for it or anything like that, but it's changed. The program has changed constantly, and I never get bored with it. There's obviously some things I like more than others. Fuck wall balls. I hate those with 1,000.
I agree with that.
Ugh,
With
like
you there.
I'm so short. This sucks. Kind of thing.
I'm not even that short. It's just for me, I just the legs give
Yeah.
out, and also I have terrible coordination, so I have a hard time catching.
Have you
But
ever had the ball like hit like you back in the face at one point?
oh, so many times, so many times.
Yeah. Right. But like, so like, that kind of stuff. Like, I've definitely changed. I feel like I'm more mature about it, and I kind of like the maturity that I've learned about it. Like, like if I want to become, stuff like that. I went, for example, I went to try out this Olympic gym that I've told you guys back at the gym and stuff like that to try it out, and it was like prepping for a competition that was going to happen in September. Unfortunately, got canceled. But like there was this young buck, even though like I'm talking like I'm an old man, I'm only 27, guys, but there's this 17-year-old kid, who immediately got attached to me for some reason. It was just like, like you should quit CrossFit and do this full time, and you'll see massive changes and you'll be one of the best in the world. I'm like, that's not my goal. I've already passed that age of like possibility. Like you maybe have that possibility and stuff like that, but like I don't personally care for it, but just seeing that mentality change of like from just, maybe that's a younger mentality change to, and I'm not saying every 17-year-old is like that, to who I am now. And not everyone thinks like a 27-year-old like that too. Like that different change of like, I have very much changed and grown into my own personality and like what my fitness goal reflects that, and I'm happy about it. I don't regret not being able to do like max deadlift all the time and break my back doing it. I That doesn't sound fun to me. But going back to like the issue of like the privilege and everything like that, I think being blunt, I'm Asian, right? Like I can never realize what the diversity, the racism, and the movement that's going on right now. As of June 9, 2020, we're facing incredible challenges of, like equality when it comes to other ethnics, like just ethnics, like especially for, with the Black Lives Matter movement, like which has had before but came to a boiling point this year, especially with the catalyst of the George Floyd event. And, like in other races of, highlighted, like, it's like, I I think there's definitely I've recently had this episode of like I have a skill set, I have the possible reach through my past field that like if I inactivity to do actions is an action in itself, and that for me not saying something in my own weird way feels like a detriment to the situation. Now, I'm personally, I might get bashed for it, and that's fine. Like, I don't feel comfortable going out there and protest. Not because I don't believe in it, just like I'm a little bit germophobic in this whole thing. So there's kind of that. And like I said, like all the power to the people that are doing peaceful protest is what I want to highlight, and like not hurt or injured. And also, fuck people who are using this opportunity as looters. You guys can go f yourselves. I think I already reached my quota of f word on this video, but like that's but that's not cool. Just don't. It's just that makes my blood boil. But like in general, as an Asian American, even though he's from France somehow and then came over, I cannot relate to like the kind of like injustice a lot of people have been dealing with, and being mute or not saying something has been something that's like I never thought would be an activist in that way. I'm like, oh wow, this is affecting me on a deeper level, not because I am of that race, but because like it's just a basic human right of equality that's just not being reflected, and that just drives me insane. So in my own way, not using this as a podcast as a vessel, but just like being aware that this is a type of time we live in, and being mute to it for whatever reason, because you feel it's more of a hassle, is not, I don't think, is a proper excuse. At least be aware and just realize like that's just how it is now. I very much agree. I will say that like, and I said in my last podcast, like 2020 has no new normal. There's no normal. It's just the time we live in, and that's just how it is, in my point. So yeah, very much like, like there's a lot of things where just like, with that said, it's just like I can't relate. And so just like, because I'm just not in that spot, and I'm aware of that at least. So, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's so important to like, and this has been a learning experience for me too, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like especially on social media, my voice usually is like I like to make jokes. I don't like to take things too seriously, and I like to make light of a lot of stuff, and do a little bit of self-deprecation and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And with this all kind of taking over the conversation, it's like there's not room for that
Mm-hmm.
right now. That's not what people need to hear. That's not what people want to hear. People don't want to hear some white guy making jokes on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's been very interesting for me to think about like, hey, like what should my voice be? Should I say anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like on the one hand, it's like people don't need to hear my voice at all right now. I need to like sit back and listen, and I've seen a lot of good posts, especially from like Black people, right? People in that community being like, hey, what we need you to do right now is amplify our voices, right? It's like we're saying stuff and we need you to grow the audience for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's kind of what I've been attempting to do. It's hard, because it's like we're all learning, we're all trying to be better,
Mm-hmm.
all at the same time. And it's like, I'm not a minority. I'm a white person, so I've
Mm-hmm.
never experienced any kind of discrimination, any kind of racism in my whole life, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I can't relate. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what people in the community are going through right now. So it's like for me, it's just been like I'm trying to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to, if I see a good point or something that I think people need to hear, I try and amplify that. And
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, I just kind of try and keep quiet or do my best
Mm-hmm.
to not distract from the conversation, right? So
Right.
even if I am going to chime in with my voice, I'm going to chime in a way that I hope um, doesn't make people think that I'm saying, "Hey, look at me," right?
Right.
Look
Right.
at how funny I am, or look at how smart I am, or whatever.
Right.
And so, which is hard because it's like I've never had to. Um, I've been in a position where, again, I'm privileged enough that I've never had to think this way before.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're all learning and trying to be better, and
Mm-hmm.
I I hope I'm doing it right. Is all I can say.
And
Um,
I think the effort is all that can be there. I've seen, as an Asian American, like like I've somehow like I haven't grown a lot with like racism, at least on my end, kind of thing. I've heard very minimal like ching chong jokes in my lifetime. Um, but like no, I think something that I've seen is like, it is a very hard time for a lot of people who want to be supportive in trying, and like attempt is what it should be. Honor, like, like, hey, I'm trying. And there's, unfortunately, bringing a little bit of like a negative Nancy. I've seen a lot of people, like, people are trying, but then there's a people who are, who are like from these type of communities that are like bashing us for not supporting them the right way that they want to. I'm like, hey, I'm just trying. You don't have to like bash at me for like, attempting, or it's not the way that you want to go to. And unfortunately, I've seen some people like that, and I think it's just like there are people that are taking advantage because if they've been silenced or been neglected for so long, then now they feel they have the right, and they're not taking that human consideration or taking that perspective. So
Yeah,
like it's
I think
like,
emotions
yeah.
are high too, and it's like, yeah, and when anytime I've seen something like that, like I haven't had anything like that directed at me specifically, but I've seen like the stuff that you're talking about, where it's like, you're being an ally in the wrong way, be an ally like this, right?
Hmm.
And the gut reaction is to be like, well, hey, I'm trying,
Hmm.
and when I have that gut reaction to be like, well, hey, I'm trying, like let me push back on this, I try and like take a step back and go, no, you don't need to fight back, just listen, right?
Hmm.
And emotions are high right now, they won't always be this high, and if you sit back and listen and kind of leave the conversation
Hmm.
to the people affected, then eventually we'll get to the point where there's a place for me to chime in eventually, right? But now is not the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, no, for
It's kind of
sure.
how I've been like approaching it.
Yeah, everyone's approaching in a very different matter. Like 2020, it's just like I don't even know. It just like it's been insane with the
Yeah,
COVID situation, the George Floyd situation, and then how that has affected like recently it's like whole CrossFit thing, which I'll talk about, and stuff like that.
yeah,
I have my opinions about it. There's a whole lot of things I've been keeping my eye on it, kind of thing of like what's going on, and but also how it affects our community and the bigger picture of things. Um, so I'm definitely there. There will, I'm sure some of us do have a question of like how that's going to affect us, and hopefully in this podcast, one way or another, I will tackle it, and then I maybe selfishly for me getting answers, but also I feel there's some people who want to know how that's going to be, because this the community, and the big reason why also doing this podcast is the aspect of community, which again this word I think has more of a sense in everything that we're playing about, whether it is our community with our CrossFit gym and like how where we're going to be, and or the community of like just as a human race, we're trying to get reorganized with like the COVID, George E. Floyd situation, or community as a world when we're trying to pull together against this COVID situation, right? Like I think community has that very word has a much bigger meaning than anything else that it has in years. And so, that's kind of like the thing that I wanted to do this podcast on, just at least on our ground level, just like people getting to know each other, how they're dealing with things, any tips or tricks that, they might share with the group is great because this is my coping mechanism and stuff like that. But yeah. So I guess on the final note, I'll ask Justice is like from your time here, like during the time during isolation and just crazy 2020, beside drinking, I'm just kidding. What has been, what is something that you would say has been super helpful to cope around throughout this whole thing? Is it time with your family, time with your wife, or time where like what is it, what has it for you has been, or things that you would recommend that has been super helpful for others?
yeah. So three things come to mind right away. One is definitely I do get more time with my wife, with Bree, which has been super nice because it's like not having to go to work in an office and working from home, and she's also working from home, right? So we're around each other all the time, which I know for some couples would be a problem, being around each other all the time, and kind of getting at each other's throats or something. But like with us, it really hasn't been um, like confrontational at all. We've mostly just been enjoying having each other around more, which is nice. And so that's definitely number one. Number two, I have been heavily relying on podcasts and music, so I'm very grateful for both of those things. And the new Run the Jewels album just dropped the other day. I have been listening to that on repeat. It's awesome. So yeah, that's definitely something that's been like very helpful. And like that's something that I relied on a lot when I was like working in an office too. But like with the additional stress of like everything that's been going on, it's just been something I've been leaning on pretty heavily as a, like an escape, to give my mind a break. And then the third thing is every single day I get to walk my dog, and that is like a tiny little moment of just like peace,
Hmm.
right? And no matter what my day's like, if I'm having a terrible day with work, if I feel like crap, if whatever, like that is the moment where I'm like, okay, like it's all fine because it's like I'm out here with my dog, getting some exercise, getting some fresh air. And like that is a, a part of my day that I'm always like, okay, like it's like a reset. It's like a mental
Hmm.
reset for the day where I'm like, I can do this. Like it's a very simple thing that I can do that I enjoy. It's fun for her. It's fun for me. And I think really like focusing in on like those little moments, it can be really helpful. Like, what's the next thing, right? Oh,
Right.
I can take my dog out for half an hour. So that's like definitely been like from from like big picture to like very very small.
Hmm.
Those have been the things that I've been focusing on. So.
Gotcha. I get, and then I like there's one more question that it just kind of popped up. I think would be really good before I forget brain fart. Okay. From these good habits that you talked about setting goals and stuff like that, if you have any other positive stuff that you're gonna keep, how are you gonna be able to carry it over once we go back to what is would be labeled as normal? Whether you go back to the office, are you gonna be able to any little tips and tricks that you learn? Like, what are you gonna be able to do or you're doing just to make sure that you keep those good habits for the future?
So I'm hoping that some of it, because this has gone on so long, I'm hoping that some of it will get kind of ingrained as like second nature stuff. But I think also just being mindful about it, and not slipping back into the same old stuff as soon as I go back. So just kind of being like, okay, hey, remember how when you were at home you didn't need to do X, right? You didn't need to get up and eat every 15 minutes, or you didn't need to chat with your coworkers about nothing and not get your work done for an hour, like just kind of being mindful about that and being like, hey, this worked really well. Let's mindfully, like consciously translate that over, and I think just a large part of it is just like intentionally kind of trying to cultivate and program your habits. Because if you don't like put any thought into it at all, then no change is going to be affected.
Hmm.
So I think that there's just a certain degree of mindfulness that I'll need to go into it. Um, but that being said, I'm hoping I can kind of trick my brain a little bit, uh,
Right. By building
and
that habit.
exactly by strengthening it, by practicing it more and more,
Mhm.
like while I'm here. But the mindfulness element is definitely super important and can't be ignored. So I think that's really the main thing.
Okay. With that, I think that's what I'm going to end on. I have no idea how to end a podcast, so I'm just going to call it here, and then
All right,
hopefully it
sounds
works
good.
in from there.
I'm That works perfectly for me because, like I was talking about before, I got to take the dog out. So
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, Justice, thank you very much for the time. Guys, this podcast will be up probably in the next couple of days. Thank you, Zoom, for being very easy to just like upload stuff. And there we go. Also, Zoom, you should totally sponsor me. There you go. Shameless plug, possibly. All right. Well, with that said, thank you very much, Justice, and you have yourself a good day.
Yep, you too. See ya.
Bye.